It's April 23rd, 2024, and you're listening to the Beer Temple Podcast.
Remember, this is what we wanted. Remember, this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again. Remember, this is what we wanted. Remember, this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again.
My name really is Michael Jackson, but I don't sing and I don't drink Pepsi. I drink beer. That's what I do for a living. I travel the world sampling beers and writing about the ones that I've enjoyed. It's a tough job, but somebody's got to do it.
All right. I think that's going to get we're going to nominate that for a fadie.
Yeah, the fadiest fade.
Yeah. Welcome to the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable. I am your co-host Chris Quinn, and of the Beer Temple. I'm joined by Mike Shalau of Is Was Brewing.
How's it going?
It's going well.
Good.
And we've got we're going to be talking about the Beer Hunter in a little bit. We got a couple guests, and yeah, so it should be good. Do we want to get into it, or do we want to have some of our trademark early show banter that everyone loves?
Light banter.
Light
the lightest
banter.
of banters.
Lightest of banter. How are you, Mike?
I'm good, Chris. I'm good. I had a wonderful Swansea day with you. I was right on time.
Likewise.
Don't let the propaganda fool you.
It's true. Right. That's true. Yeah, it was a good time. I think everybody enjoyed the beers. Weather cooperated.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
Yeah. We didn't have the Fade Master there on the ones and twos. We got the 12-inch Grinch, Wally,
And
there.
the fader actually
And
broke.
Yeah, we could have used the Fade Master because we blew out his speakers.
Yeah.
And it stopped
We
working.
were just partying too hard.
Yeah, we were partying too
Sorry
hard.
for partying,
Exactly.
Wally.
But it was a good time. People
Yeah.
had lots of Cantillon, some of which still stuck around. We have some Creek on right now, which is cool. And yeah, now we're here talking about beer television. You know,
Yeah. That storied genre of so many successful shows.
right? Is it fair to say we're going to talk about the greatest
Yeah.
beer show?
Yeah, pretty easily.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I wish there were more, but
Right.
this is definitely the best one,
Okay.
in my opinion.
Well, we've had some folks. I think everyone has been on the show in some form before, so I don't think we need to have any first-time introductions. But why don't we get right to it? We can go in order of seniority. Seniority not being, well, the only seniority that we care about, which is how many times you've been on the show. So that would be Mr. Jude LaRose. I don't want to say Jude LaRose because then I'll be accused of forgetting who Jude is. Jude LaRose of Hop Butcher. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Good.
I hate bringing this up and always giving you a tough time about it, but in the last episode you guys released, you did it too.
What did I do?
Somebody's name. I forgot.
I messed
Somebody
up
you
some-
know really well, too.
Oh, okay.
Mike,
No, it was somebody.
Okay.
I was driving and I laughed.
nobody.
Okay. How are you?
I'm doing great. I always feel bad that I give you a hard time about
Oh,
it.
it's okay.
But I never want to make you mad.
Aw. Never want to make you. I never want to make you mad,
Thanks.
Jude. Thanks.
I'm great.
Thanks for coming on.
I'm so excited. I feel it's an honor to be on this podcast and talk about this show.
Yeah.
It's great.
It's cool. Yeah, and you've the show that you prior to this had not seen before, right?
Hadn't seen before.
You'd heard of it, obviously.
Obviously.
Yeah.
I would say this is the most I've ever interacted with Michael Jackson beer content.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
So it was great.
I think we might have further episodes about Michael Jackson as well.
Yeah.
I think he's a pretty important person. So,
Very.
And of course, as he himself said, we're not talking about the dancer and the Pepsi drinker, the Pepsi spokesperson. We're talking about the beer writer.
Yeah, it's a non-problematic show.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Somewhere he also says, like, I also am on a world tour right now. That's where
funny.
beer.
That's great.
I would say second greatest beer show, Sam Calagione,
Oh,
Dogfish
yeah.
Head.
Yeah, that was a good one. Or he-
Brewmasters, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. After that, it's going to get pretty hard to
falls
come
off
up with
a
another
real
one.
cliff.
Yeah, yeah.
I know
like
of
right
two,
to
but
brew
neither of
dog.
them are any good.
And our final guest, back after a long, long time. What is that sound? What is that sound? Okay. Sorry.
smooth
The
jazz.
suspense, yeah. It's been a long time, Mr. Steve Hamburg. What's up? How are you?
Hey,
Hey. You and I were on a video version, which did get released, I think, as part of the podcast, where we were in
Owen and
Engine. R.I.P.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That was a cast show.
Yeah, for those of you out there who don't know, Steve is, among other things, a cask ale aficionado. We've referenced Hamburg on the show
course.
on multiple occasions, so
Legend.
real heads will know because we've mentioned him, but now we've got him in the flesh. So, how are you doing?
Dynamite.
Good.
And an honor to be on this show, particularly with the subject matter.
Yeah.
Because for the longest time, about the only thing people know me for now is that I knew Jackson. So I'm known for knowing people in the industry. People say, "What's your connection?" Well,
Right.
You know this. You know Randy Mosher.
Yeah. Yeah, right?
You knew Michael Jackson. Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
I knew him before they were famous. Right.
Well, Jackson was already already famous when I met him.
Well, the Americans then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And you also are the Caskmark ambassador in the United States. Or,
Yes.
Yeah, as well. So something that I need to get my act together.
You have the Golden Sparkler now. You just
I have the
step it
Golden
up.
Sparkler. I have to be Caskmark certified. If you go to England, it's quite legit. I would say
It's legit here too, Chris.
No, I know, but there's not. It is legit here, but if you go there, there's a lot of them. I should say. I mean, that's where it's from. It
It's
has to
over
be from.
10,000
Yeah.
pubs
wow.
that have Caskmark certification.
That's a lot of
And in
pubs.
the United States, since it was introduced in the United States and parts of North America, 25 or so. Most are closed, so we're probably a dozen right now
Yeah.
across the U.S.
Like 12?
12.
Yeah,
So,
a
yeah,
lot
we
of
have-
room for improvement.
Yeah, we have tens of Caskmark places, but not for want of trying. I've reached out to a lot of places.
Yeah.
And even though it doesn't cost a lot to apply and for certification, I mean there are fees involved.
Sure.
And it's like an annual subscription, but you have to pass it. And it means every cask beer that you serve we'll test up to 6, but no one really carries more.
Not
than
an
6.
issue here.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah. But every beer has to pass an independent assessment.
Gotcha.
And the first time it's twice, and then in subsequent years you'll be assessed. And again, it's unannounced, so people just show up and they show identification. We alert the site that here's a person who's the assessor.
Gotcha.
And then you'll be checked on temperature, appearance, flavor, and aroma. So
Of a cask beer only.
yes.
Yeah. I know a guy from England, and he was telling me that he has the app and was looking for it, and he was like, your place doesn't show up. And I was like, yeah, I'm not certified. He's like, you're not certified? He was like,
Amateur
upset.
hour over here.
Right. I remember being in Denmark
take the Golden
and finding a
Sparkler.
place in Copenhagen that was Caskmark
Absolutely.
certified,
Yep.
and it is meaningful. In England, I think I put more weight on the Caskmark than I do on the camera guide personally. because I've had a lot of crappy cask beer from places on the camera list. I don't think I've done that with the cask mark.
Are we starting a beef with camera right now?
I've had an
Do
ongoing.
they have a podcast?
I've not beefed with them, but they've gotten a lot better, I think. But anyway, that's by way of talking about English beers and British beer, and from there we can talk about maybe beer writing and so on and so forth. But may I, before I forget, we haven't gone through, there were a bunch of emails last week that we went through. So there's a few podcast reviews that we haven't mentioned. Not that we always do, but there's some. So every once in a while I like to kind of check in. And it's always interesting. The Allagash White of podcast has definitely taken on, because I have someone who says we're the Philadelphia Phillies of beer podcasts, 2.5 caps.
Are they actually giving us 2.5 stars on there? Though?
That one person did. Yeah, that is becoming a little bit of a
Don't
thing.
commit to the bit. Come on.
There was somebody else who's called us the 3-tier merch of podcasts.
Well, that's
They
probably
gave
a
us a
6-star
5.
review.
They gave us a 5-star. Yeah. Each episode is as high quality as a North Face and 3-tier branded beanie.
Did you win the Untapped Community Award of Avondale Gold Medal Podcast?
Seventh place.
Somebody else said we're the headhunter of podcasts.
Oh.
Double gold, baby.
Let's go.
Please send 3-tier branded Yeti cooler to 123 Fake
The
Street.
90-gallon.
That was their review. They said they asked for free merch. I am
We're gonna get
totally on board with Tony PNS, who wrote that one.
Tony PNS.
Oh. I just got that one.
Wow.
All right. Thanks, Tony.
Hey, Dad, open the cup. Close
Yeah.
the cup. Open the toilet. Dad, are you smart?
Sofa Toast also gave us a 5-star. And then Packet Man also gave us one. I'll read. Can I read this one? This is a 5-star review.
Yeah.
He says, "Allow me to regale thee with tale of libations divine, conveyed through the auditory realms by the wondrous The Beer Temple podcast. Verily, 'tis a marvel, hosted by the esteemed Chris Quinn, proprietor of the Beer Temple Bottle Shop, and the venerable Mike Shallow, the mastermind behind the brewing alchemy at Iswas Brewing. From the very moment the phonograph begins to spin their melodic voices, he must put it onto wax and then listen to it that way."
Oh, he's the guy we mail the records to.
Yes. Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, the masters, and then
Him
he
and,
gets
him and
them
Wally.
pressed.
Yeah.
Yeah. A symphony of hops and barley doth dance within the ears, transporting the imbiber to an ethereal realm of beer knowledge. 'Tis as if one hath stumbled upon a hidden cellar, where the amber nectar of the gods flows freely, and the wisdom of brewmasters cascades like a bubbling brook. Chris Quinn, a maestro of malt, leads the discourse with a blend of erudition, and conviviality. I don't know all of these words. Yes. His passion for hoppy elixirs is as evident as the froth upon a freshly poured pint. Each episode, he delves into the depths of the beer universe, sharing insights, anecdotes, and the secret of the brewing artisans. Alongside him stands the
How long can reviews
sagacious
be? Sagacious. I've never
Mike
heard that word.
Shallow, a brewer of unparalleled skill, whose
hated
tales of ale crafting resonate like the notes of a well-played fiddle. His wisdom, garnered from years of fermenting magic, adds a richness to the podcast akin to the finest barrel-aged stouts. The duo's camaraderie is akin to the bond betwixt barley and water.
Whoa.
Betwixt. Inseparable and essential. Together they traverse the landscape of beer, from the hop-laden hills to the malt-kissed valleys, leaving no keg unturned in their quest for brewing enlightenment. In the parlance of our time, I declare the Beer Temple podcast a 5-star gem, a beacon guiding thirsty souls through the labyrinth of ales and lagers. Forsooth, if thou art a devotee of malted wonders and seek a podcast that doth quench thy curiosity, look no further. Let the Beer Temple be thy sanctuary, and may the effervescence of knowledge flow endlessly. With frothy regards, 3 bottle caps. So,
Shakespeare.
Whoa.
Right there.
Yeah. That was
yeah.
Canterbury
So,
Tales.
Thanks, Packet Man.
Thanks, Packet Man.
Appreciate it. So
That
those are our reviews
That was great.
lately. So thank you.
That was
to-
more effort
to
than we
you.
put into most shows.
Yeah, probably. Not this one.
Not
though.
this one. Not this one.
No, we're here to talk about, the original beer writer, at least of our times. Probably not the original of all times, but
Yeah, not
certainly
like
of our
Pliny the
time.
Elder.
Yeah. So, where to begin? We should probably talk to. I mean, there's probably a lot of people who don't know about the Beer Hunter show.
Yeah.
Was it, Steve? Do you know if it was originally for the British market and then also aired in the U.S., or was it always supposed to be in the U.S.?
It was done with Discovery and Channel 4 in the UK.
Okay,
So it was pretty much a simultaneous release.
got it.
I think they did different orders here, a different order of the episodes, of the 6 episodes.
Yeah.
I'm not sure of that, but that wouldn't be unusual because a lot of British shows, when they showed them here, they show them in different orders.
It makes sense because there is. So we all watch. Well, you probably watched them differently before, but I've always watched them on YouTube. They're all on YouTube.
Yeah.
And they're in a playlist, and they're in an order that is obviously the order that they were intended to be aired, but they're numbered backwards. So like the one we just listened to is numbered as the 5th episode, but it's the first one in the playlist. So, and that's very clearly like the intro, because he doesn't do the whole like I'm Michael Jackson and
he doesn't
I
do
don't
it
drink Pepsi again. But
He doesn't do it in every episode.
but that's labeled as the 5th episode. So it goes 5, 4, 3, 6, 2, 1 on the
Yes.
the playlist that we have.
Do they have one as California?
Yeah.
yeah.
So I wonder
And
if
it wasn't.
I'm guessing
Right.
America
The
did them probably where California was first, and then
I don't think so.
you don't think so?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
I mean, it's a long time ago.
yeah,
Yeah. So when were these? When did these come out?
1989.
89. Yeah,
Got it.
Yeah.
I was born that year.
Oh boy.
I'm not even that young anymore. But
I have to do a lot of calculation on how
Yeah,
old I was
geez.
then. Yeah.
All right, and well, Steve, as somebody who
Same wow.
knew Michael Jackson, la di da, can you tell people out there who Michael Jackson was, and yeah, and also who he was, and then also like how he was regarded contemporarily, and then we'll kind of talk a little bit about how he's thought of now.
Well, Michael was, I think, for many of us, and look, I'm 70, so Michael was the first guy I ever saw books that were written about beer. He was the first guy, and it wasn't like a home brewing book.
right, and it wasn't like an academic.
It wasn't an academic book. So, and of course, I didn't know there were academic books back then.
Yeah.
And I had seen home brewing books before that. But Jackson, when I really started to get into beer, Jackson's, I think it was The World Guide to Beer was the first thing I had ever read. And you were like, oh my God. And it was just an incredible book. And it just showed kind of, for many people, it was there, if you hadn't traveled abroad, it was a way to learn what was in each country. And he focused on each country, all the European countries. And of course, back then there were East and West Germany, and it was Czechoslovakia. And he didn't do a lot in Behind the Iron Curtain, but he did have guides for this. And the United States were very few breweries because it was a very different time. So there were only a handful of what we called then were microbreweries. So he did, I think the first book he did was on the English pub. And I didn't
have that book of his.
Yeah, I didn't see that until much later because it was out of print. So you had to sort of find it. I think he referenced it as, he was the author of the English pub and whatever. And that was, it's kind of a quirky book, and it isn't as beer focused. But the World Guide to Beer was really a seminal deal, and it was one of the first things that introduced the concept of beer styles. So people talk, there were other writers. He's not the first writer. Fred Eckert, who is revered in the beer world. He's from Oregon. He was a World War II vet. He was a dynamite guy. He wrote an early book called The Treatise on Lager Beer. He also he wrote about styles, and I don't think he used exactly the same terminology, but he was already approaching it. But Michael did a much better job of sort of classifying things. And I think now, of course, now everybody, we challenge them. We all, the knowledge about beer is pretty widespread. But everybody started with Michael. So, and anyone, I mean, if they say they didn't, they're, almost everybody started with Jackson. He's revered pretty much everywhere. Actually, I will say this: the place where he's least revered probably was in his home country, and that's because there were other writers. There were already people who were his age or older who were starting to write about beer. And I think some people
global or local?
Local.
Right,
yeah,
right.
Yeah, so, there was no global writer. So there were those within Britain who thought that, Jackson, his knowledge wasn't as sharp and he didn't do the research. And he had been a journalist by trade, and so he wasn't he wasn't from the brewing industry, and he may have repeated myths that still abound. And so I think he became more revered in the U.S. People really embraced him here, more so than the UK.
Yeah, I mean, that would make sense. It was shortly after craft brewing really started going, where his books were available. So, we don't have that rich, direct lineage of, kind of artisanal brewing or small batcher brewing or pub culture. And so we were kind of starting anew in, the late 70s was, kind of the earliest
and
point.
So the first people who came in, I mean, to read something from Jackson, you're like, oh my God, I had no idea.
Yeah, so
I want to go to these places that he's recommending.
And it becomes foundational for people who are starting their breweries and what they're going to make, right? An understanding of what is being brewed
I think
around
if
the
you
world.
talk to, the third brewery that opened in Chicago is Goose Island. Most people don't know that it was the third, but John Hall would tell you that Michael Jackson was absolutely critical as an inspiration for him, and he brought him in early for appearances at the brew pub. And when they opened Fulton, he was there at the opening of Fulton Street, and even the beers that they were making, the types of beers that they did at Goose from the beginning. Much of that was inspired by things that Michael had written about.
Yeah.
And just having talked to other people who have been into beer for longer than me, and kind of remember, reading Michael Jackson, and we're talking mostly about the Beer Hunter, but I think a little bit of context is helpful. I think it's important to remember that when people were reading or even seeing this stuff on television, these beers were not available in the country, let's just say 99% of the time. Maybe there were, maybe you get Lowenbrau or something like that, but you couldn't get it. So you had either never heard of them and often didn't even know that type of beer existed, right. Or you had seen it when you were overseas, but probably, unless you traveled, throughout Europe, had no idea that this stuff even existed. And I think one of the huge contributions that it sounds like Michael Jackson contributed, for better or worse, is classifying beers, because in there, a lot of these were just, maybe didn't have, especially the Belgian stuff, didn't have a classification, right? He was just needing to write about them and said, well, we'll kind of group these this way. And, did that have an effect on how beer was classified here because you're also you've judged a few beers in your day, right? Yeah.
But the homebrew categories,
right,
all inspired by Jackson. Now, of course, there are committees in the BJCP. There's so much knowledge, and people argue, and we have way more categories. But Great American Beer Fest, the Great American Beer Fest was inspired by the Great British Beer Fest. Great British Beer Fest only judged beers in like 4 styles or 5 styles. It would be bitter, best bitter, strong bitter. I mean, mild.
There's an episode of the show where he goes
Yeah,
to
when
the
he
Great
goes to
British
the fest. Well, now they have a few more categories. But GABF has hundreds, and all of that really started because Charlie Papazian was inspired by Michael's work. And needless to say, they worked together on a lot of stuff. And so the categorization that we know today, much of it had its start or inspiration in Michael's writing.
Yeah.
Sounds like the Belgian beer community or brewing community too was, felt that they owed him a lot of debt. That they said, we didn't think that we were doing anything special, but Michael highlighted and walked in our breweries, and he kind of pointed out the things that that we were doing that others weren't. And he said before that, our export was maybe about 10 to 19%, and then after that, we just saw our exports go out of the roof, and that was all due to Michael Jackson. And that he was one of the first to highlight really like the true American craft beer heroes who were out at the time, and then inspired the next home brewing community that would be responsible for that next wave.
Oh, absolutely. And I think one of the things he does mention multiple times in the show is that he said it's a very important point, is that beer is like wine and should be treated like wine. It was the alcoholic beverage of the northern climates. It's like in climates where you grew grapes, you drank wine. In the north, where you grew grain, you drank beers. And he says, these are both great beverages. But he kind of raised the discussion of wine, a discussion of beer, and made it more equivalent to discussing wines. And of course, one of the funnier things he talks about is like, you get these fruit and passion fruit and this. And he goes, well, if I had talked about this in my pub, you'd probably get thrown out.
Right, that's from the very first episode.
Yeah. And he comes back and says, you catch it again?
Yeah.
He said something, he said if they could talk about wine people like knobs, he's like, but they look at beer people like slobs. We could,
Yeah.
But very much like, so, he changed that whole discussion. And
allow people to think of it as more than just, a commercial lager, and that it could be elevated somewhat. I think he was also very, open that it doesn't need to be hoity-toity and shouldn't be, but that in certain cases it warranted it and deserved it. I do want to quickly say, I was joking about Steve having judged once or twice before. You're a master?
No.
BJCP?
No.
Just a dude?
No, I'm just, I took the exam once, scored high enough to get national, and I never took the exam again.
Oh, okay. Well, you've told me you hold on, but you've judged enough to qualify for some sort of whatever. We don't need to get into that.
No, yeah. Okay. This is not merit badges.
Yeah.
I don't really care.
Right.
But yeah,
Okay.
hundreds of competitions, yeah. Sure. But
okay.
I need to be master or grandmaster. I need to get a much higher score. I have to retake it and get a 90 plus, and then we'll see how my credits rank.
Got it.
But
all right.
it's
Well,
not important
let
to
me know when that
anyway.
happens.
Not going to happen.
Yeah,
I'll be dead.
Yeah. So I also think so. So do you want to go through the show? I think there's a couple themes that I want to touch on that kind of go throughout the shows, and we can use examples.
Sure. Well, should we just lay the foundation of what the show is for people who haven't seen it? It's
Please.
6 episodes. They feature different regions of the world. There's Belgium, there's Bavaria, as he called it, or Czechoslovakia then.
Bohemia.
Yeah.
There's Bohemia. Then he does Bavaria.
Yep, Bavaria. Actually, I think it might be the other way. Bavaria, Bohemia, and then it's Trappist beers, British beers, and then finally American beers in California. And
It's
Anchor.
not just Trappist. The Belgian, he does hit Lambic.
Yep. Yeah. Right.
And they have Madame Rose, who's pretty famous and was the inspiration for
Madame Rose.
Madame Rose from Goose Island.
Yeah, she's in the first episode. Yeah, that beer dinner. The Burgundies of Belgium, as it's called.
Yes.
Does anyone
And that
remember,
was, I think it was Gudenband.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
does anyone know who Madame Rose's beer was at Goose? Isn't there like somebody always attached to one of the beers?
Like a-
It's not Phil Wymore,
I think
right?
it was Phil Wymore.
Was it?
I think so. I think that was his. Yeah.
But I mean, I know,
Perennial.
but I know Greg Hall. I mean, because he had connections with, he met her too. So,
So what are some of the themes
yeah.
that you saw throughout these 6 episodes, Chris?
Well, I think one of the themes that I saw was, I think, how much. So this was like 35 years ago, and even 20 years ago, which to us would have been a pretty early on in the craft beer explosion. Things would still have been 20 years before that kind of became like staples, like things like the beer pairing dinner, which was shown as a novelty in the Belgian episode. Things like the brewers going to know from Anchor Steam, going on a trip to see where the ingredients are made of and how novel that was.
That episode specifically was like where it really hit me, because I know American beer the best, obviously, of all these regions, and seeing how much of the groundwork of what became the values of craft beer at large are just in there already. And I don't know how much of it was just all craft breweries at that time, because there weren't that many, but how much of it was just Fritz Maytag's, just what he valued and what he understood, and what he wanted his brewery to be as the archetype of what breweries in America strive to be.
Yeah, so as like an archaeological thing or a historical thing, it is interesting to see that. Yeah. And you do realize that the personality that craft beer was founded on is very much that California brewing culture that you see in that program, because it was like, descendants of New Albion, who's like literally number one, and they're like, and you're talking
yeast,
to them,
and they're using the same yeast from New Albion
at Mendocino, which Mendocino we carried them in
Red Tail Ale, right?
The beer temple,
absolutely,
and that they were still around, and that whole kind of like slightly crunchy, slightly do-it-yourselfer vibe,
right? But there's
was very much there.
But there's also like some Middle America heartland ethic going on in there too, because Fritz Maytag is from the middle of Iowa, so the idea of like going to the field and connecting with the land. He grew up not on a farm, obviously, but I've been to the town he grew up in, and
a washing machine farm he grew up.
Yeah, washing machine farm, right. And a blue. His family did have a dairy, like they made the blue cheese, but the idea that you should go and connect with the land and the place that you are getting the raw ingredients you're from is very much like a belt, like a wheat belt kind of ethic, combined with that kind of crunchy, like California thing, and like the sunglasses and sitting in the sun and
sitting around the campfire,
and
playing
the
guitar,
guitar.
And
how I swear that was Huey Lewis in one of those scenes.
How many guitars were on that tour bus? Just 5
know.
people. I thought it was Eddie Van Halen. I was telling you.
It probably was.
Beer drinking culture still exists in that same way today, that you're just hanging outside on a picnic table, you're making do with whatever you have, and everyone's just hanging around having a beer. My wife and I were watching, and we're like, this just looks like what we're doing right now. And that it was like that in 1989. It was so cool.
You did make a point. You texted me that next time we go to Beer Temple, we should throw on some sport coats and drink like Michael Jackson, dress like Michael Jackson.
That was the biggest thing. I don't want to call everybody a yuppie in that video, but him and a lot of people brought a class to it. I do feel that we should just walk in with a coat, and just sit down.
But that's very
we should have Michael Jackson.
That's very British.
Yeah.
So, and I think Garrett Oliver, if you know Garrett, and Garrett, who is widely admired in the UK, and his
style is out of the roof. Yeah, I mean, he's the upper echelon of.
But Garrett,
style, right?
Garrett also was was very tight with Michael, and he has the Michael James Jackson Foundation that he's doing. So he's known for dressing up, if you hadn't noticed, if you've seen it.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
so we'd
we've
always
seen the guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
He likes to dress up.
Yeah. And that's a Michael thing.
It was great.
Yeah.
We're going to do it sometime.
I like that idea.
Next time.
Have
I need to get a jacket.
Their tweed blazers.
A Michael Jackson day
you
where
could-
everyone dresses up and
You're going to have to get
I've got the hair going right
You're
now.
going to have to get your picture on a tie and wear that.
You know,
like
but
he
to that-
later did.
To that point, we're joking, but I mean, it just there was something to the way that he moved and everybody in that video moved that connected you to something that you still love about beer to this day. That you saw yourself in all those people and just really enjoying the most basic of like life's pleasures or necessities, just in all of these classic styles of beer, and just everyone was just chilling and they weren't making a big deal about it, but you could tell that they enjoyed the nicer things. And at that point, it was just local microbrews.
I also think it's crazy how it's 35 years later, and these are still probably maybe there'd be some tweaks of exactly what styles you would talk about or where you would go, like brewery wise. But these still seem to be the things you would talk about and places you would geographically you would go, right? Like it's not like maybe we're leaving out other maybe there's some great stuff going on in like South America now or something, but these are still like the
if you had to pick
regions
one
you talk
state
about.
in the United States to go to, you'd go to even that you'd go to California still.
Or Ohio.
Well, we would go to Ohio. Yeah.
But yeah, and like it's
Middleburg Heights.
Yeah, Middleburg. Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
This is a fat head.
Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, it's like it was so cool, and like the quality of the show. Like obviously, the dupe that's on YouTube has some dubbing issues, and it's off of a Gen 1 DVD or a VHS.
Yeah, it's what everybody watched 5 seconds behind.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
all watched it.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
5 seconds behind. Sometimes it's a
Like
minute behind.
Yeah, it gets worse
Sorry,
as
Mike.
it goes on.
Oh
too.
yeah. It's a horrible thing on YouTube.
But like the quality of the not filmmaking, but the television making and like the music choices and the cinematography of like the specifically the Bohemian one, where they start off in this like foundry. He's like, these men are drinking beer from one of the greatest breweries in the world, and it's like this beautiful like operatic music.
Actually, some of the great things they're playing Smetana.
Yeah,
So the Moldau, and the weirdest thing is he plays the New World Symphony,
yeah,
but that's because the composer was from Bohemia.
right, exactly.
So
like-
beautiful music. The thing that strikes me about the show, when I really think about it, Michael wrote it. He was the writer of the show, and he was a very good writer, and it really comes through in the fact that he wrote the scripts for these shows.
Yeah.
And they're really not. They hold up.
Right.
Like 35 years later, you look at it and you say, well, I might quibble about some of this, but as a show that's is going to take beer and make it accessible to people, okay, so he's not cool.
Could
I
he
don't know.
speak
You would.
French?
Pretty cool.
Yeah, he could speak French. Yeah, and that much of that's self-taught because he didn't have a college education.
Oh wow.
So he was working on a newspaper when he was a teenager. He was a very good writer.
Well, and they said he was really professional too. So speaking of him, really curating it, that they said one of the beers around the beer dinner, they all tasted, and it was just pure vinegar. And they said, and everyone could tell that it tasted like vinegar, but he just went through and continued to talk about the beer and highlight, how it was made and where it came from. And we all knew what he was tasting because we were tasting it too. And they said we admired him because, he just knew how to.
Well, that was a
champion.
famous trait of him, which when I was first listening and watching Michael Jackson, I saw as a flaw, but I've learned that it's the opposite. Was he would never badmouth a beer, and someone told me that you had to look for what he didn't say about a beer, and that's kind of when you learned how he wrote about something, you could see maybe how he felt about things, because he very rarely slammed a beer, not slammed it,
Except for Corona.
right. Oh, okay, maybe Corona.
But if one of the seminal books for me So before the TV show. So he had a pocket guide. It was called Michael Jackson's Pocket Guide to Beer. And it's this little thing. And so I took it for my first big trip to Europe. I went for a month in 1987. And basically, I was going to all these places that he mentioned. And I hit a bunch of countries, and I looked for beers and breweries, and I just did what he said. And when I met him the first time, I said, "Look, I think it was the second edition. He was on a tour, and I went and he signed my like it was the first time I met him, and he signed my book." And I always remember because I told him, I said, "Hey, your first book was so important to me about traveling, and everything was fabulous." I said, "Look, this guy knows what he's talking about." I went to this one. I was like, "Oh my God, it's just the way he describes it."
Yeah.
And the beers, he gives it a 1 star. The ones he gives it 3 stars were better. The 1 stars were not good. It was exactly right. Like, everything got a star, but you could figure it out.
Yeah.
And I think we forget how good he could communicate things. And in a small book, in a concise book,
Yeah.
it was beautiful.
Should have done bottle caps like they do nowadays.
And obviously, it goes without saying, this is pre-Untapped, pre-rate beer.
Oh, yeah.
And
Pre-internet.
right.
Pre-internet.
So these are the only access, the only way you even knew these beers existed were in these books, right? Like you couldn't look them up in any other way.
Sure.
Like let's get other opinions. It's more just like
Yeah.
that probably factors into the not wanting to badmouth things that these are places they're trying to make money.
But let's remember, there's another thing. He was kind of one of the not so hidden secrets was he was paid by a lot of breweries.
Oh.
So he didn't badmouth anybody. It really wasn't to his advantage. And so I think that's why some of his colleagues in the UK were more critical, because they felt like he could have been more critical.
Sure.
And people were looking at him. But, I mean, people aren't beer writers for money.
And he needed money to start
That's
up a
the
lot
po-
of these projects, too,
Well,
right? You're not
I
going
mean-
to get him off the ground.
Yeah, and by who was going
Fund
to
it.
pay him?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a job. So yes, he was paid by reps of particularly early American brewers would pay him. So what's he going to do? Criticize him? You think he was going to write bad things about Anchor?
Right. No.
Yeah.
You probably don't have as many eyeballs on you then as you would do now for doing that stuff,
absolutely.
right?
So people are much more critical about him today because he was seminal. He was so important to us. What's the most amazing thing is when you're with him, he's not the most. Everyone would say, "That's our representative." He's kind of round and schlumpy, and his shirt was out of his pants, and he probably hadn't washed his sports coat in a while.
Yeah.
The blazer is really rumpled and whatever. But what was amazing with him and spending time with him was to go to a place with him where nobody knew who he was, because he had all these different things that he liked. And I was with him at blues clubs here because he really loved music. And he said, "You want to go to a blues club?" "Yes, okay, let's go." Nobody, we walked down by stage, all of a sudden every musician was talking to him. It's just incredible. Like everyone in the bands would come over and it was like a magnet. And he knew who inspired him. He had questions for him. He knew a lot about, he loved jazz, and he loved blues, and he knew he had listened to the recordings.
Well, he was a famous writer of whiskey as well, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, he wrote books about whiskey.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But I mean, but to be with him, I'm just saying, I was with him at blues clubs here in Chicago, and I was like, "Hey, white boy, like, get us another beer."
Like Hamburg, do you know Jackson?
Yeah. No, they didn't know who he was. They just I'm the guy with them, and they're like,
They
"You,
liked him.
hey, you, get us another drink." Okay, and they were just mesmerized by him. He just had that ability to reach
Charismatic.
out. In his,
Oh,
it's a
I see.
strange
They didn't
way.
know him. They didn't
Nobody knew him.
Right.
It was just a guy, and he would ask them. He said, "I enjoyed your set," and started talking. And they said, "Oh my God, this guy really knows the music we're playing." And next thing you know, all the musicians, whenever they had a break, they were sitting at our table.
I think there's a story that said when he'd visit breweries that he didn't care how long it took. He'd ask the most technical of questions and wasn't mindful of whatever the time was. That he'd pause and he'd just ask and ask and ask because he wanted to understand.
Yeah, and he wasn't technical. So he openly admitted it. He said, "Look, but he talked about flavors and aromas like nobody had, and that was really critical. And that, I think we get all of that because let's bring it back. It's the 35th anniversary of the Beer Hunter.
Is he the first to call like a goose, like describe a goose as like horse blanket?
Probably, but I wouldn't swear to it.
I know Flemish Red and Flemish and Oud Bruin or certainly Flemish Red. I think he coined, and Belgian Strong Pale, and
a lot of the names.
Petrus,
like
right?
that.
Or is it Petrus?
Petrus,
Yeah.
yeah, I know a lot
Triumvirate or
of
whatever.
those styles that he just kind of
Conjured.
named. Conjured. And
Northern and Southern Brown
Yeah.
in Britain.
oh, is that him?
Sure.
He did that?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. And he and I used to joke about it.
Where does Dogfish Head's Indian
Well-
Brown Ale fall in those?
Right.
Either? No? Joking. It's a
Well,
joke.
They already named it.
Yeah, I'm
What
joking.
was the joke? What would you joke about? Specifically about the brown ales. the
Well,
north
because
and south.
I mean, there's always a question of whether it's really just a mild.
Yeah.
I mean, what's a Southern brown ale? So, I mean, one of the things in Britain is that
When I went to London, they didn't know what the hell I was talking about.
No.
And I was like, "Where are these? I'm here to find them."
no, because they're just milds.
Yeah.
And so it's just like pale ale. So there's in Britain, pale ale is just a bottled bitter.
Yeah.
And IPA is whatever an IPA can be a standard bitter. So it can be you can have an IPA that's 3.5%, like Green King is like 3.8 or something.
Right.
But Jackson so there were sweeter beers, typically from the south around London, slightly sweeter brown ales, whereas the northern ones, like everybody's training beer, Newcastle Brown. And, so Newcastle Brown was important because it got people to drink beers that weren't golden. But is it a particularly good beer? I would say not really, but Jackson tasted that, and it was drier and a little crisper, maybe a little more lager-like. And then you had this little thicker, sweeter, southern style of brown ale. And so he said, well, you just see it around London. So he called it Southern Browns and Northern Browns. Well, in Britain, nobody called them that.
Yeah.
They're just, it's brown ale.
Another area, we're talking about the British Beer Fest and just British ales. There was another time when I was watching this show, and I thought, I bet you that really influenced people just specifically. I mean, obviously they'd been to the Great British Beer Fest, and that directly inspired
was the best episode,
Great
I thought.
American Beer Fest. But I'm sure it being on television, helped people we should do things
should do
like
a
that.
fest.
Wow, a beer dinner. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Pairing everything with a different, beer, and having beer in every, and it's like, so it's maybe coming back around, but for a while it was almost passé to do those things. But like these fests are still, big deals, and I think a lot of that stuff is it is just funny how people almost can be such points of inspiration, whether I don't know if it merits it or not, but people just like put so much onto it, like, okay, well, we should do this and we should do that, and it's strikes me as maybe very American, like, okay, this is what's on that show, so we're going to start doing that. We're going to make Trappist beers, we're going to make real ales, and we're going to make German beer, and we're going to do, all
Maybe
this
even
sort of
beer
stuff.
tours too. I mean, it might have been the first
Yeah.
time anyone saw any equipment, right? With that episode when he's walking through the like cold, dank cellars.
Yeah. Those are Cal.
Just bringing you inside and seeing kind of how the the donuts are made. That'd have been the
mean,
first time I would have known anything about brewing if I watched that in '89.
I scribbled a note knowing that I was going to be on this, and I had a couple of things. I said, it's no surprise that, because I had his 87 pocket guide, but of the 6 shows, every one of them had a place that I'd been to.
Wow.
And why did I go to him? Was because of him. So
Right.
anything that's there, and then more pertinent to what I do now is the British one as he goes to a pub in London to
Oh,
have
yeah.
cask conditioned ale, and he goes to the White Horse at Parsons Green. That's how I learned how to do cask conditioned ale. And he goes to cellar with a young Mark Dorber, who is my friend to this day, and I just saw him, last month. And,
Yeah, I noticed the White Horse. Now that you said that it's in there, I noticed it immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was there just on my last trip. I was at that pub, and I didn't realize that I was there. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, you could.
When they tap that pin, and that when it's in the the cooler.
It's not a pin.
Or
It's,
that was
it's
a firkin?
Yeah,
That was-
yeah. And Michael says, soft peg it.
Yep.
Soft peg it. So. Sure. It
great.
was a bass pub then.
Earlier there's a great little scene where it shoots up at the guy, all the pressure goes up in the guy, and he's trying to get it back. That's great.
Oh, the guy at the festival doesn't know how to do it right.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I need a refresh on a beer. Why don't we take a break, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit more.
Absolutely.
All right. We're back with the Beer Temple podcast. I am Chris Quinn of the Beer Temple. I'm with Mike Shalau of Is Was, and we're joined by Steve Hamburg and Jude LaRose of Hop Butcher.
Nailed it.
Yes. And we're talking about the GOAT of beer writers. Everything has to be the GOAT, especially my children. And
That's cringe, Dad.
The
Yeah, I
Rizzler
know.
of beer writers.
Exactly. Yeah, the Rizzler of beer writers for sure. And something that struck me about this show, it came out in 1989, and it was such an interesting time capsule to see. Really, beer before I ever knew it. Certainly beer culture in that way. Beer culture to me was just, like more
Rolling Rock.
bar culture. Yeah. And which is cool. I like bar culture too. But it was amazing to see. We're such a melting pot now, and we were such a barren wasteland then in '89. I forget how completely drastically different the three big beer cultures were, being British beer culture, or the British Isles, I'll call it, Belgian and the Belgian area, and the lager brewing countries. So Germany and Czech Republic and stuff like that, and just how they were so different, and we forget that because we have now all coming out of the same cylinder conical, all coming out of a draft at a brew pub, and I am pro. I think this is cool that we're able to do it, but they all come out and they all just seem the same. Oh, I want a Belgian beer. Oh, I want a lager. Let me try your lager. Let me try your Belgian golden ale. Okay, let me try your porter. That's just so common if you go to a brew pub. And just how completely different these brewing cultures are. One with cask ale, where it's fermenting and you cellar it in the pub, in the point of distribution. The idea being you get the absolute freshest beer you possibly can, because the moment it's ready, you're tapping it and you're drinking it. And then the Belgians, with all their just insanity and like there's so many different crazy things that they have going on, and the sour beers that they have, and the bottle conditioning,
fruit additions,
fruited spices, all this stuff. Yeah,
smoked.
Yeah.
right. And then you have German, also smoked, but then lagering, seasonal,
Hitchline barrels,
right.
huge ass barrels.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
You see those guys wheeling those things? They're ginormous.
You've been there,
Yeah.
done that.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
You have? That's
Oh,
great.
yeah.
And by the way, what about that guy? Sorry to interrupt you. But, were those that guy that was like filling, I don't know, they looked like kegs. But that dude was like filling real ale and just kicking them.
Oh yeah.
in the British episode?
Yeah.
It was like
Banging the
filling.
buckets.
I think those would have been
bang.
like
That's how you do
either
it.
a firkin or a kilderkin or something like that. They were big.
Kilder, yeah.
Yeah.
And then it was like 200 of them.
Oh yeah.
But he didn't give a.
Yeah. That's
No,
how they
you
go.
whack
Make
it,
it, yeah.
you kick.
And
yeah.
they just kicked.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just go.
It was hilarious. I left my.
Yeah.
I can say ass, right? I
Yeah.
left my ass off.
At a small scale, they're still done, but larger places, it's a little more automated, but not by much. They use more of a counter pressure fill. They flip it open, whack it in, take it off, roll it.
There's so many awesome episodes, like moments of this whole thing. I didn't mean to interrupt your thought,
No.
but that's another big thing of it. There's so many moments you just got to watch. But go on.
And they weren't doing that sort of stuff in any of the other nations. They
Right. It
weren't
wasn't
doing
like they
that.
were cast conditioning their like any of the Trappist beers.
No.
Right? They wouldn't do that.
No.
But we've like kind of homogenized them all.
I mean, they're
in
really
America
all
to
just
kind of-
bottling all the Belgian stuff.
Right.
There was
Of
very
course.
little draft going on. It was all bottled.
Yeah.
All bottle conditioned.
Right.
And
We look back at that now and it's like
Except for the raw lambic. So he and Frank Bone go and they drink raw lambic.
yeah, at the Congo bar.
Yeah, the Congo. Belgian Congo.
Yeah. I said this was a non-problematic show.
Yeah.
So
Don't want to talk about that.
right.
Did
But-
you see
but-
the way one of the monks looked at the Belgian candy sugar? He like stares at it for like 5 minutes. He's like analyzing the candy sugar before he pours it.
You got to.
What you doing?
If you're not looking at
Ponder
it, are you even brewing if you're not looking at it?
Sorry.
Come on.
Yeah.
You've done plenty of hop editions where you had to look at them and then get pictures taken.
Yeah.
It's great.
But
Ca- Camera's rolling,
Yeah.
so look at something.
Yeah.
But it is amazing how,
Contemplate.
like, I think that's the other thing that struck me was how much beer in my life has been really Americanized. Even as I am drinking right now an Austrian Zwickel beer,
Right.
And before that, I had Steve was drinking a cask ale brewed here, but it was on hand pump, and it was a real ale. And Jude was drinking a authentic Bavarian Rauch beer, and you were drinking a West Coast pale ale.
We've covered every segment of the show.
But it's so messed up that like whenever before very recently could you do any of that stuff? I mean, we're in a very different time right now to be able to do those things all at once.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what struck me was if you want to get real ale, you had to go to England. If you wanted to get these gooses and lambics and stuff. Now, the Belgian stuff traveled a little bit better, but in '89, realistically, you had to go there, right, Steve?
And by the way, I love dating myself because when I first moved to Chicago, which was, more than 10 years before you were born, Mike, none of this existed. We all drank. The only beers you had, there were imports, usually green bottle beers. There were cans with
Probably Heineken and Lowenbrau or something.
Lowenbrau, you had more Becks. But, Heineken was skunked because it was green bottle. You didn't get it on draft. You didn't really see a lot of beers on draft. You would never have seen something like Pilsner or Kel. Everybody drank a mainstream standard lager, although there were a handful of regional beers that still existed, like Leinenkugel and Wisconsin was independent, or Point. So there were a few small breweries. Even in Illinois had them.
But also, we had the American beer culture was huge. American beer industry was huge, but it was much more of a monoculture.
It was complete monoculture.
Right.
Every beer, you usually bought it for the advertising. They were
And it
all
was left
based,
out of the show.
Yeah, they were mostly they were adjunct lagers, all about 5%. There was no light beer category.
Right.
And there were cheaper versions. So you had budget beer, a premium beer, meaning like Budweiser would be the premium, and then you had a super premium like Michelob. That was as good as you got. By the way, Michelob was an all malt beer. Ooh, oh my God!
Big deal.
And that was often when you went to a place they had one draft beer.
Yeah.
It was often Michelob.
Yeah.
Almost anywhere.
Growing up, it felt like Europe was a lot more exotic. And that would
Absolutely.
have uncles say like make more of a big deal of traveling to Europe, and part of traveling to Europe was just kind of introducing yourself or getting to dig into what makes these places the places. And a lot of times it was beer. You know, beer was a finer thing. So you just felt very fancy and exotic to go. You know, I remember my Uncle Matt was like dating a girl from England and going over there and just talking about the English beers that he had, or if he went to Germany and talked about the wheat beers that he had. It would, to me, maybe it was only because I was like 7 at the time and I had a different understanding, but it just seemed a lot more exotic of an experience. That's what you did.
I still think, look, you know, you hadn't been in England, right? I mean, it's an eye opener when you go. And
I've been there before, but not in 10.
But
yeah,
I
not in a
tell
while.
people all the time, it's like, still go. If you think you understand the stuff, you don't understand until you're there. I mean, and it's more accessible to us now. So things are less expensive. We're a smaller planet. I encourage people, even in the beer world, we have access to all these things. But I'm not one I don't bring beers back from Europe anymore. I go there, you know, things we don't get here, I don't care. I drink them there.
Yeah.
You know, we're spoiled for choice. Jackson, and bringing it back to Michael the Beer Hunter, he's made it possible. He's the pioneer. You do a Hall of Fame, and there are people who are working on like a beer Hall of Fame in the U.S., and we'll see it happening. And needless to say, Jackson would be top of the list for the inspiration that he had, and opened us up to these ideas. And I think it opened me up to, I want to go to Europe and to drink beer.
I think it touches on your impulses. And Chris, that's what you were saying too, is that there's no way to experience it. So
That's
I think
right.
it starts to kind of connect with your synapses, and it says,
Yes.
you know, you don't know, but you might be interested in doing something like this. Then it pulls you there.
Right.
Cask Ale was not, I mean, everyone, it's funny because everyone pigeonholes you. I became pigeonholed with Cask Ale. Look, I embraced it. But when I first started to brew beers, and when I was really interested, I was interested in German beers and German styles. Who wasn't? And I thought, hey, you know, I'm drinking standard American generic lager. I wanted to drink beers in Germany and see how they do it. And when I had them there, the first things I wanted to brew, I was already trying to brew them before I went to Europe. It was an eye opener. But but going to Britain for the first time in '87, I was like, Cask Ale pubs. Oh my fucking god!
Yeah.
I loved it.
Yeah, totally different, and really the idea of like, if you think about it, like, what was beer hunting in '89 when that show came out? What did it mean to be a beer hunter?
He's not a ticker. Like, it's not like he's going on there to finish out the set on Untapped. He's like really trying to explore and try these crazy things he might have heard about or that are different from where he came from. And it's really interesting to watch him. Like, he's a very articulate person, but not necessarily a very like expressive, if that makes any sense. Like when he's talking about these beers, he's not like effusive and like
not
emotional.
like Garrett Oliver can be, where
right.
he's just like,
but the way he uses language is such that it's so specific and so correct, like the way he describing these things with just the words, that like the intonation and the tonality not being like exuberant doesn't need to be there.
Right.
And he's really an effective communicator.
You're totally right. He connects you to something you haven't drank in before in the most easily like understood way.
Yeah, he clearly.
And then to speak in not technical terms.
Yeah,
Sure.
Because increasingly when we judge beer now, everyone uses, you have to use the technical term, but if I'm talking to a brewer, but to communicate this to the public, you need to speak. For us, we speak English. And I often tell people when I'm judging or I've been a master Cicerone examiner and I've asked people in style stuff, is don't talk to me like I'm a technical person. You're a beer educator. You know this. How do you communicate the things you guys make at your breweries, the things you sell here at the Beer Temple? How do you communicate these things to the public?
He's drinking a Belgian beer. He's like, this is a beer for the soul.
Yeah.
Right, he's not talking about the SRMs of it.
Sure.
Like,
That's right.
Which is tough for people that like spend all day thinking about these numbers that we have to hit to make them.
Yeah.
To shift gears is something that some people are very good at and some people just can't.
Yes.
And so
And
to have
you hire
someone
the
like
right
him
people.
who wasn't a brewer and didn't pretend to be a brewer and wasn't like he was when there's one part where he was in the Pilsner Urquell brewer and he talks about how they have 5 yeasts, and I'm like, is that they really using 5 yeasts? But like he's just like, it's more of those things. But he's not like, oh, and they all do these things. They creates this diacetyl. Not doing that. He's just in there. There's these beautiful shots of it. He's talking about kind of how they make it enough for the lay person to understand, and then it's kind of about how the beer tastes, smells, looks, and then like maybe the vibes. Like a little bit of vibe.
And how
to
do
it.
you again? How
Culturally.
do you sell it? I mean,
Yeah, and that's something that we have forever should be getting better at. Is you're very good at it, Jude. Actually, is like describing things and talking about things in ways that aren't necessarily technical, but are evocative and people can connect with.
I mean, my pals, we always say we quote the Three Stooges on this. What's this stuff for? It's for sale. So get busy selling it. So figure out how to sell it.
Awesome.
And then one last thing I noticed. Well, not one last thing, but one was just how America has just made. We make now everything. Like
Right.
it almost seems like. I don't know. It's not an identity crisis. It's not. It's just like we have everything except for British cask ale. I don't think we really. I mean, there's a tiny bit of that.
Yeah, that's
but
more of a
not,
consumer thing than I think people don't understand it as much right now. But
yeah, I think that's the one thing you still have to go for. In fact, watching that show again, I was like, I've never been. I got to go to the Great British Beer Fest. I mean, because that seems pretty insane.
That was my takeaway too.
Yeah, it's like that's got to be.
But honestly, even what does Jackson do? He says the best way, you're at he's at the beer festival, and he says the best way to experience British beer is in a pub.
In the pub.
And he takes them to a pub, and that's what I learned.
Yeah.
The festival is a festival.
Right.
And you taste, but that's not the experience.
Right.
So the best place is in a pub that serves cask ale great. And then
That's
go,
true.
that's where I went, that's where I really loved it and I went to something like 20 GBBFs in a row. And, it's like, after all, it's just a beer fest.
There's something very interesting to think about where like that he's at this festival. He is the most listened to voice probably about it. Maybe not in England like you were saying, but
one of them.
But nationally,
Yeah.
yeah. And he's like, this is fine, but we should just go sit in the pub. And like I feel like American craft beer, maybe it's coming back from it a little bit, but got to a point where the best place to experience a lot of that stuff was at a festival 2 ounces at a time. There were a lot of stuff that was like so intense and so meant to be impactful rather than things you would drink a pint of. But the British
nice segue, because that's the last thing I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, but GBBF doesn't tell you. They started with only half pints and pints.
Oh, that's cool.
It's amazing.
And now
amazing.
and now they do thirds of pints. You can get a third of a pint. So you can get different size glass. Where you could always get a half pint glass or a full pint glass. And those were the only serving sizes. But now you can get a third. That's the smallest size.
That rocks. Imagine an American beer festival. You can get a pint, or half a pint, or a full pint of Abraxas.
Well, you pay. They also pay
But
per beer.
But to talk
gotcha.
about that
There you go.
is I do think that you're right. I mean, I think for a while it was being pushed that way, and I do think it was being pushed by the supply, the makers.
Sure.
It was the brewers who were pushing this.
A little bit. It was.
There were some.
We were in league with the consumer.
Pints of Imperial Stout?
No, of the fact that intensity and like just a bunch of
I
pours
meant
of smaller
festivals.
stuff.
Festivals being the place, because that's where all the hypest stuff was going. Maybe in league
Maybe,
with
but
the
no
consumer.
one was making money doing festivals. They're fun to do, but
Two things real quick that was far out. I poured at a festival in Minneapolis last weekend, and the person that came to grab a pour said that the reason that she came out is because she's from Seattle and their Fresh Hop Festival got canceled, so she got pissed off. She's like, so the next thing I'm doing is I'm going to the Minneapolis Craft Beer Festival. And I was like, right on.
me too.
Wow.
Here we are.
Okay then.
That was awesome. Second thing, was there a takeover in the British episode? One of those breweries had like a hostile takeover.
Oh, they were the Batemans. They were
Batemans?
they were trying to.
They tried.
Yeah, they
Right.
beat it.
Yeah,
I know,
that was
right.
years ago, and
That was
Bateman's
cool.
is still
I
there.
had no, well, I mean, I had no idea about
That was the original GoFundMe campaign. It sounded. Like.
Yeah, right.
It was.
And it worked.
Actually, it was family battles. So
Right.
yeah.
Right. No, I had no idea. That was just a little
'Cause it's a
tidbit
family
in that
business.
episode.
Yeah, and that another crazy thing. I did get to meet the
Yeah.
Batemans.
Did they know
Yeah,
they were
wow.
going to win?
No. Are you kidding me? No.
Right.
I had no idea.
They were just the.
But that's the other thing. They talk about seasonality in a lot of those episodes. Only in some, actually. The Belgian episode, they didn't really talk
No, the
about
the
seasonality.
Germans.
The Germans, they talk about seasonality.
Only when they said only when they interviewed the monks and they're like, yes, this is a very strong beer, and they're like, I get red faced. And then
Yeah.
they're like, and then Michael Jackson was like, oh, so maybe we're on a holiday. That's when you have a very strong beer, and he's like, a triple. He's like, that's when you'd have a triple, and the monk was
Right.
like, yes, that's when it was like
Not during the fasting period. Yeah.
It was
Right.
hilarious. It was hilarious. You could tell, yeah,
Yeah.
not a lot of triples in his wheelhouse.
Right. But seasonality looked like it was definitely a German thing. A little bit of English. There was a Christmas beer that they might make, but they didn't certainly talk about it. Maytag talked about his Christmas ale.
Of course.
That's what they were making in the.
Yeah.
You know, to get the
But-
malt for that.
But yeah, to show how seasonality was a German thing. And I had never really thought of it that way.
Yeah, because here we think of seasonality so much as the ingredients being ripe at a certain time. But what they're talking about seasonality is, or
Maybe
I
you are.
do.
Yeah, I think you do.
But anyway, what they're talking about is the style of beer that's right to drink at a certain time of year.
Absolutely
Right.
true.
And how, again, America ruins it. Like, we're now making pumpkin beers in July because the product cycle has to, like, you have to be the first to it, right? But there's like this beauty of when he's talking about these like heavier lagers, these maltier lagers
Yeah.
that are better for the cold weather, where they
Yeah, our
they are-
pre-orders for pumpkin beer have already been put in. True.
You haven't gotten an order from
and that's
me.
our show.
No,
Yeah,
what
right.
we have to do for our distributors.
Sure.
They already
Of
have
course
to put
you-
it in.
But there's also kind of
April.
like religious
up.
holidays or agricultural considerations why these things
Sure.
are being released at the time, right?
I mean, maltier beers in the spring. I mean, the monks with Fasten beers. You know, there's that whole tradition of having something that's more restorative. But I mean, even
Wheat
Britain.
beers in summer.
Yeah,
and,
but even
you
in
know.
Britain, with their limited styles, with cask beers, you tend to get maltier beers in the fall and winter, and then porters and stouts. Well, stouts are popular, particularly Guinness, which is not really British, but stouts and porters are more, and darker beers are more popular in the winter. But summer, you're going to have, and that's what's really developed in Britain is more golden ales, more beers that are ales, but more in the style of pale lagers, so that small breweries
Right.
can make them.
And
Because people want lighter things that are more refreshing, and we have global warming, and
but for the seasonal stuff, I do think that it was. I was trying to think of well, part of something being exciting to get is that you can't always get it, and how that's been kind of like gone to its maybe logical American end, and is maybe coming back from it a little bit now. And at the same time, it's like, well, none of it's special if you can get all of it all the time. Like, I don't want to be able to get it all the time. I do want stuff to be not hard to get, but just not available all the time. And I think there's a difference between the two.
Totally. What you want when it's the right time for it to be available, you want to be able to get
Right.
it all that time.
Right. I think
Fresh hops.
You don't have to like wait in line for
Fresh hop
Oktoberfest
season
beer or
is
something,
important for a
yeah,
reason.
like I think around the Super Bowl is when I would always think of Hop Slam or something like that.
And then it comes out in October. And
Right,
it's a
and
totally
you're like,
different
what?
thing.
Yeah. But things like that, it's like, oh, that to me reminded me of a little bit of how the Germans were seeing seasonality. At this time of year, I can expect to see this beer, and then I can go and get it, and that's really cool. Not necessarily like this beer is being released at this time, this day, and you have to go get it because that's just the day that it's released, and it's the only time you can go get it. But it isn't really tied to any other thing other than rarity.
Right.
And
As
I like
opposed to like, oh, this is a changing of the seasons, which means like this is my relationship with the seasons, which means that this is coming up next. Which
Sure.
I can feel this way,
Right.
and it just.
I mean, even wet hop beers now being available all year round.
Yeah, frozen.
I hate that.
Yeah.
I don't like that.
It doesn't make sense.
It's cool, I guess. Like the
Yeah.
technology is cool, but like I used to say, that was the last true seasonal beer,
Right.
and now
You're
it's
right.
gone.
Well, I used
you
to
know?
like talk to people at festivals, or when I was talking to them about, we make a wet hop saison. I'm like, you can only make this beer for like 2 months out of the year, and then you capture that flavor in the beer, and then now it's not true anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
Which stinks, because I'm not going to use frozen IQF wet hops probably, but I don't know.
Well, maybe
There was something special about like
yes.
capturing it in like
Right.
this thing, and it being like you can only do it this time of year, and I drove up to Michigan to get them, and blah blah
Right.
blah. But now that story's not as
Right.
as potent.
And I think it can be overdone as well. If you could probably come up with something every week of the year.
Of course.
That is like, this week is the week of this, and now we release this beer, and next week is the week of this. And like that's just, at some point it dulls you, and then you don't care about anything.
and now we're just
No.
greeting cards making up holidays.
Well, the other thing is, I've said this about with IPAs and people being more critical with a lot of hazies, and that the shelf life is shorter, and that the demands on the brewers. And I've said to people, it's like, that's not sustainable for the people you want to make the beers. It's like, if you demand it, it's like, oh, it's 3 weeks old. I don't want it anymore. It's old. I'm like, Christ. It's like, if you like a product, these people can't afford to be in business making things where they have to dump beers because it's not fresh enough for you.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm old-fashioned in a lot of ways. I mean, I'm not as old-fashioned as people think. My brothers call me they call me the curmudgeon, which is funny because I'm not compared to them.
Sure.
But there's always a lot of projection in families, but
Every accusation is also an admission.
yeah.
You know?
But one of the things I always embrace, and I think Jackson did this, and what I learned from him, and it goes back to the show, was that like travel for it. Why does everything have to be available to us here? So
Yeah.
honestly, when I'm in Chicago, this is the greatest time to be in Chicago for beer.
Yeah.
We have so many great breweries around here, making all different styles of beers. And what's changed in my consumption is I tend to drink. I mean, if it's really well made here, I drink local stuff.
Yeah.
Unless I'm in a place where they don't have the kind of local beer scene that we do. But we don't have to have every style, or like everyone would say, why don't we have all these lambics, and why don't we import them? Puts a demand on Chris, who runs a store, who says, you got to have these products year round. It's like, why don't you just go there? Mm-hmm. I mean, we have dynamite selection.
I go there, he means go to the beer temple where we have all of your favorite. No.
Yeah, but again, it's really great to travel to places and have it. And Jackson, much of what he did in his life, which is the best part, because he traveled all over the world. I mean, I ran into him in Tokyo, which is one of the crazier things.
Drinking delirium trends.
No,
Talking about
he spoke at
sharp
the.
pours.
What's that?
I was joking. Talking about sharp pours. Nothing.
Yeah, sharp.
Sharp.
Sharp. Yeah.
Sharp
Sharp
pours.
pours.
Yeah. That was kind of before it was a thing.
Yep.
Yeah, that would have been in the 90s.
Chris,
or
that's the
something.
next big thing. Next
No,
podcast
it's not.
topic. No.
Sharp pours.
Sharp pours are not the next
so
thing.
so this guys. But I mean,
So
it's-
Jay, do you want to go
Luker's already over, huh?
But I really think, I keep telling people, it's the most important thing in beer. It's like, why does every beer around the country, I grew up in a time where, people were running across the country to get Coors to bring back to University of Maryland because we couldn't get it because it wasn't sold east of the Mississippi.
Yeah, we watched.
And then we all went, and then of course, then we got it, and we're like, okay, what was this all about?
Yeah.
It's just kind of a beer that we couldn't have.
Right.
So
for sure.
my thing is, well,
Still exists.
why don't we embrace this? It's like,
I'm
you really
with you.
want to taste it? Go there because you might learn something and travel. Go to San Francisco. If you've never been to the West Coast, go to the damn West Coast.
And it's gonna mean more when you get there and drink it there,
Yeah.
right?
And-
Than if you do a beer trade, or if you get a beat up version of it. That's not to go too off track, but that's not the feeling when I went to Phil Farmstead, right? Like the beers were obviously great, But going there was like the thing, and feeling that I was driving up to it. And that made the beers taste even better. And I think that's true for a lot of these things.
Couldn't agree more. I think having had more beers than most, I still think going to places have been kind of formative, even for my understanding of West Coast IPA. Like going there and having a lot of them in different parts of the West Coast has formed my idea. I get a better idea in my mind of what it is. And going to England a couple times and then going to Scotland and trying the beers there and going to Ireland and trying the beer singular there.
I went to Wallonia when I was starting ISWAs and tried them all there. You know,
right.
It's like there's a different feeling when you drink them there.
I think there's you have a different context.
Go to Saison Dupont.
Yeah, I did.
Sit in the Cave Dupont and drink there.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, this is...
Yeah, and then
Pretty awesome. What's up,
One
Jude?
of the episodes is, I think, called Five Senses, and it doesn't just apply to drinking the actual beer. Probably has to do with seeing, smelling, hearing the environment. You drink
Right.
the
Yeah,
beer.
with the hearing, also, that used to be a Fred Eckert thing, was listen to your beer.
Listen to your beer because you can see if it's infected or
Well,
something like that. Yeah.
But it's true. It really is true.
Now, I want to, we don't have a ton of time. I think we have some.
yeah,
Trying to keep our shows a little shorter.
we are, but
So,
we're a verbose duo though.
but
So
we're doing well.
nice.
I want to talk about something that's very important that Mr. Hamburg has brought to my attention. And Steve and I were sitting the other day having beer, and you posed a question to me, Mr. Hamburg. Do you remember what that question was?
What happened to lacing on our glassware in America?
That, and I was like, what are you talking about? And you said, you know, I was like, we still have lacing, and we started looking around the bar, and there was tepid lacing at best. And we had just both been in the UK, and we're like, well, you remember what it was like there? And I was like, yeah, I do. And it was where it was almost like sometimes it would be like a wall of foam that would almost like crust on the inside of the glass, Steve, and it would just be like you could see every kind of drink. He's holding up
That's beautiful.
Yeah, right. He's holding up, okay. So he's holding up a picture of good lacing.
Mm-hmm.
And what has happened? And you might be at home and say, I get great lacing. What are you talking about? And I'm specifically, and I think you are too, Steve, we're talking about out at the pub, right? Out at the American bar,
Absolutely.
right?
Also, you probably don't get great lacing at all.
Are there hops in these beers?
I think
by the way,
better
too?
than
Yes.
better than at the
Across the
bar. I think I do. I could do some experimentation. So that is the next thing that I am going to work on. Steve, if you have any breakthroughs, you're going to tell me.
Steve
You
Briggs
know-
I
has
wanna ask-
Lucre faucets for everything.
Right. I mean, maybe that does it. If that does it, but why has it? I think it's changed. And
What
it
do we-
isn't-
what do we
Come
think?
and it's changed. Yeah.
What do we think? What are the theories?
First, if you drink a beer too fast, it's not going to have lacing.
We're
You
not
think
drinking
that's
these
it?
beers very
Right?
fast.
I don't know.
For
but
one, right?
I don't know
you've
if I
gotta
agree
let
with
it.
that.
I mean, these got to go. You have to kind of establish lines. If you Jim Seebeck's the fastest beer drinker in the entire world. I try to model myself
king.
after him, right? If you're going to take a pint
He's a
down,
good guy for that.
right? You're not. I feel you're not going to develop anything along the side. You've got to develop stages. Go on.
No.
I don't think it's about
Why
pacing.
don't you finish?
Yeah, finish.
I don't think it's the pace, but because this has been a sore point. Really, I don't know. I mean, certainly post-pandemic, but leading up, even before, I started to see going to bars that I'd gone to, or tap rooms, or brew pubs that I'd gone to before, and all of a sudden, lacing was gone. And I thought, did everyone go from 3 sinks to automatic washers for the glasses? Then in England, one of the things I noticed is nobody uses the glass rinser in Britain.
And that's pretty ubiquitous here.
Yeah. And by the way, we never used to that. One thing we're really good at here is copying everybody else. So, because one place got a glass rinser, all of a sudden every place in town had a glass rinser.
It looked cool.
Yeah.
You have a glass rinser, though.
Yes.
No, I said Blucher as an example. Yeah.
But
No, but I mean,
you're a follower in
yeah,
this one.
But no, but
Seemed like a good idea.
Lucre's,
Maybe it
yes,
is.
it controls different ways to dispense. All these things are really good. It's like using a sparkler or no sparkler.
Sure.
But
Golden
I mean,
sparkler.
yeah. But by the way, if your beer is high condition and you have a sparkler, I tell people in Cashmar, I said, like,
Take it off.
It's too slow to pour your beer because it foams too much. If you have really good condition in a beer in a cask, and you pull it through a sparkler, it's going to foam too much.
So what do we
So
think?
it's- yeah,
Why aren't we getting laced on these glasses?
Or why not? I mean,
We don't know. I don't know.
I think it's common. I mean,
what
I
do you
used to
think?
My guess was they're too clean.
Well,
Right.
Like there's nothing to grab onto.
Well, I mean, it has to be beer clean, but so my theory has been a combination of overuse of sanitizer. Maybe we have to play down what's recommended to sanitize
Like the
glass.
packet has too much
Yeah, that
sanitizer
it has
in it.
too
Maybe
much,
it's like
and
half
because,
the packet
because
or
it's
something.
then the other question may be based on. I mean, I see beers. Some beers are just flat, or you go to places and their lines aren't balanced, so they pour pretty soft beer anyway, and there's not a lot of head when they pour it. But we've had beers today that had beautiful
Good
head.
condition. I mean, this
Wonderful
beer
condition.
should be lacing.
Yeah.
That beer should be lacing with that much foam. I'm holding a
And-
beer that is
Still holding a cap of foam.
6/7
Yeah.
the way done,
You
and
have
it's
two
got a
layers
little
of
cap
it.
of foam. Right.
Yeah.
Like so, you've got good lacing at the bottom. Right.
Yeah.
Surge has decent
Straight
lacing,
bottom,
and it's all the way
Water never
around.
made its way
But
to
I'm
that part of
talking
the
about
glass.
the ones where it is a ring, at least on 50%, half the front half of the glass, and the back half is just like a wall. But the front is just like you can see every sip that the person took.
Are we diagnosing this as like a cleaning glassware problem only, or are we thinking there's something that's changed with
It's-
the barley we're
I'm just
using,
putting
where
it
the
out
protein
there, man.
structure's different?
I don't think
Over modification.
Yeah.
I don't.
Oh, the barley. So it wouldn't be. So it could even be international then, because I'm trying it with English beers, German beers,
Yeah.
American beers.
A hoppy brew's gotta give you lacing.
You
Yeah,
think the
but we're
hops
not-
increase it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
More protein.
I mean, I
Yeah.
got some lacing
Yeah,
on this.
but-
It's the hoppiest beer on the table, probably.
Mike is right though. What if or you guys are right too? What if it's too clean? What if there's no nucleation points for it to
So
cling to?
that's
Right.
And then oil at a certain point is actually a foam inhibitor, so maybe our hops are too oily now.
Well, that may be, but I've seen good results with. I think generally I've seen better retention with hazies. So
More protein.
yeah, more
So
protein.
much
So there's so much.
oats,
So it's way advanced.
Meats, oils,
Yeah,
all the sabro.
all these other things. So it's a complex deal. But I mean, classic beers that we would. I mean, classic styles with beautiful head retention. We're not getting them, and
Yeah.
I've just been. I'm in Europe. I'm drinking beers. It's like great lacing, great lacing, great lacing. Great.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get so bored with.
To your point, there's one thing if there's not enough foam on the pour. That's one thing, right?
Yeah,
Of course.
If we're getting
Yeah.
boss pours all the time.
That tells me
That's
other
one
things
thing.
about the line balance.
But even if we got a good, is there something about the way we
Yeah.
with our sanitation and our
I
cleaning?
think that's all that because it's across the board. This isn't, used to, you could always tell you went to, their system's not really balanced or whatever. But used to be, I'd go to any bar, and most any place in town, craft beer bars, brew pubs, beautiful lacing, beautiful lacing. Now, no lacing, no lacing, no lacing.
I wonder if there's been fundamental changes in soaps and,
That's
and
what I'm-
anti-foaming agents in
I
soaps.
talked
probably,
I talked to
Low suds soaps because they're all low suds.
this is
which,
the
like-
anticoagulation of low,
When
low moisture mozzarella.
I ran into a guy at Goose Island when Goose Clyburn was closing, and some guy was there. I said, "Who are you?" And he goes, "You wouldn't know me. I'm nobody." And I said, "What did you do?" He says, I sell all the glass cleaning equipment to Goose Island." I said, "You're just the guy I want to talk to." And we had a really long
Cornered him.
conversation.
Yeah.
And John Hall comes in and like, "What are you talking to him for?" I said, "Go away." It was great, and he's
at the going away party.
Yeah, and
the founder comes in.
But
Get out of here.
But the guy,
phone retention.
the guy, he's like, "I never thought of this." It's like, yeah, we've changed a lot of stuff in terms of cleaning regimen and what we provide places.
For sure.
He says,
Yeah.
I just hadn't thought about it.
Yeah, I wonder if it's there's also cost-cutting mechanisms that go into
Yeah.
the type of things that are we don't think about. We just think soap. But soap can be a bazillion different types of compounds.
I'm not the person
We're not
scientifically
soap
to
brewers.
know. Yeah, I'm not the person to know, but I want to throw it out there to people.
Here's
who are
what I
listening.
want.
Yeah, hey,
Speaking of
Ecolab,
throwing it
making
out
a
there.
soap that
Hypothesize
doesn't ruin
here.
my head retention.
Yeah.
We have an email.
Okay.
This is better. We love getting handwritten letters. Mm-hmm. But this one I think is better, unless you're going to print out. If you print out a picture of your lacing, you are a G, first of all.
Yeah.
But
If
I'm
you
not
have
ex-
a printer, you're a
Yeah.
step ahead.
Yeah.
So,
Take a picture.
No, but email us if you think you have what you would consider. I want 9 out of 10 or better only. Don't give me this 8 out of 10
No.
BS. So if you have
4.5 or
lacing,
more bottle caps for
it's
your
got to
lacing.
be at least full Belgian lacing. So Belgian lacing, I would say, is where it's this like spider
crust on
web.
top.
It's a spider web all the way across. Belgian lacing, I think, is a huge Belgian lacing is maybe a 9 at best. I'm talking the stuff where you're seeing horizontal lines for all sips, and I want to see it on both sides of the glass. That's 10 out of 10.
that's-
Steve, this is an audio medium right here.
I'm
Or
just,
talking
I'm
about
just,
visual
I'm just
only
sharing it
glass.
with my
Can I
colleagues.
see
Right.
that glassware again?
Although I am asking people to send me photos. So what I want is people to tell me, send me photos. If it's at your home, fine. If it's out at a bar, that's what I want. I
Yeah.
want to know. And if you do get it, get all the information that you can. Okay, about the beer. What beer was it? Do you know anything about the cleaning regimen? Ask the bartenders. Be the weirdo.
If
If
you're
you're a
listening to this
brewer-
podcast,
Getting
you're already a
into
weirdo.
it.
Yeah.
Just let the flag
We're
fly.
going to solve this.
Yeah.
We're going to solve this problem.
Yeah.
But we need
Yes.
your help out
And
there.
this will help everybody in the,
It'll
in the
help
industry.
Wow, this is
Everybody.
great
People
material for
love
this.
it.
Right here.
And it also
We're going to bring back
better
lacing.
better head retention you'll get in beers. Looks better all the way down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's more appetizing. I'm all into like selling stuff. Remember,
Right.
Mo said in the 3
Yeah. What's
It's
it
for
for?
sale.
It's for sale. So that is my call to arms for everyone out there.
I love
At
this.
your
It's our
home,
new campaign.
that is fine. That is good. I would still like to know, but it's really out in the marketplace at beer that you've had on draft.
I think we need to start a group. We need an acronym. I think we'll
Yes.
talk about it later.
If you have a
but
good
I
idea
think
for an
this-
acronym, you can also email that to us. It's insiders@craftbeertemple.com. Acronym suggestions are also. Don't give any now, Mike. Think for a
Not
week.
Sorry.
not PNS.
Yes, he was like staring up like he was
Tony
looking
P.
at
No
the,
PNS.
You know.
I was running the crossword
tops.
algorithms in my
Half.
head.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Tony PNS. If you have
we'll
any
leave it.
acronyms
We'll leave it
for
there.
us.
We'll let
Salacious
the listeners do the rest.
Spades.
And thank you to the listeners. We didn't thank them earlier. We were too busy listening to Michael Jackson. Exactly.
By the way, which was a combination of like a late 80s, early 90s, like Penny Marshall, Gary Marshall, like, comedy that might have been in like San Francisco or California. It might have been Rookie of the Year. Like it has this just 80s pop music. It was
yes.
Mrs. Doubtfire. Go listen to that
Yeah,
music again.
Especially when it turns to like ragtag. When he like picks it up, it's like yeah. When the trumpet starts going, it starts out as the English horn and then turns to the trumpet.
We'll put the link to the playlist on YouTube in the show notes.
Sure.
Everyone should watch the show.
Yes.
It's awesome.
100%.
Yes.
You're if you listen to this show, you're going to love this. Don't mind the audio not being synced up.
Actually, you should see if you can get it. Was on DVD
Yeah.
released, so get it where it's really synced up because you lose a lot of that.
You can probably get it on like interlibrary loan or something at this point. With it.
If you have a VCR player, I think
Oh,
I
my
still
boy.
have the tapes.
If your
Yeah.
dad has the duped VHSs of when it was actually on the Discovery Channel, let us know. We'll pay you
beta.
We'll pay you top 3-tier merch for those.
Yes, exactly.
You got Laserdisc, let us know.
oh
Yes.
yeah, that's pretty high tech.
High quality, yeah.
Well, thank you to our listeners in advance for all the amazing research they're doing for us.
Yep. Drink beer, do research. That should be
yes.
our new slogan.
Yeah.
Yeah. Take pictures, send them off.
Thanks to the Fade Master for the beautiful fade in.
Honestly, one of the
Very
best we've
complex
ever had.
fade. And that was like an improvisational like fade that was going on. We were talking to him. We were just figuring it out.
It's a
So
dynamic
very well
fade.
done. Very well done.
Outstanding.
You'll
best
be
in the
getting a
biz.
fadey for that one. And
The 10,000%.
and then our
raise.
guests, Mr. Steve Hamburg and Mr. Jude
De La Rosa.
De La Rosa.
Jude De La Roche from
Yes.
Rage Against the Machine.
Yes. So thank you both. Thanks everyone. We'll see you next week.
Remember this is what we wanted. Remember this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again. Remember this is what we wanted. Remember this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again.